Ethan stood at the edge of the floating garden, his fingers brushing the glowing leaves that swayed softly in the alien breeze. The sky above Lyra Prime shimmered with colors he had never seen before, colors that seemed to hum with life. He had traveled across stars and galaxies to stand here, finally close to the one being he had admired for so long, Alara, the alien princess. But now, as he looked at her through the silver-framed glass of her private chamber, he felt a weight in his chest. She moved with grace, her long limbs gliding across the room, as though the world itself bent to her will. Yet there was a distance between them, one that no amount of travel or courage could bridge easily. Ethan remembered the first time he had met Alara. He had been a young diplomat, tasked with observing alien culture and negotiating small trade agreements. Alara had spoken with wisdom far beyond her years, her voice calm but firm. Even then, he had felt something stir deep inside, a sense of admiration that slowly grew into something more, something he could no longer keep inside. Over the years, he had watched from afar, attending every diplomatic mission he could, finding reasons to be near her. Each encounter left him more certain of his feelings, but each time he returned home with nothing said, nothing confessed. And now, after years of longing and quiet courage, he finally had a chance. He took a deep breath and stepped into the chamber. Alara looked up, her eyes widening slightly in surprise. Ethan's heart raced as he approached. "I have loved you." "For years," he said, his voice trembling just enough to reveal the depth of his emotion. For a moment, there was silence. The hum of Lyra Prime's city seemed to fade, leaving only the two of them in that garden of light. Ethan waited, unsure what reaction he would face. Would she laugh? Would she turn him away? Would she see him as just another human visitor, naive and overambitious? Instead, Alara's eyes softened. There was no immediate rejection, but there was something else, something he could not read at first. Shock, perhaps, or maybe curiosity. She tilted her head, examining him with a depth of attention that made his chest tighten. "Years?" she asked finally, her voice low and careful. Ethan nodded. "Every year. Every meeting, every conversation, every moment I could spend near you, I treasured it. I never spoke, because I didn't want to risk our friendship. But now I cannot stay silent any longer. I had to tell you the truth." Alara stepped closer, her glowing skin almost touching his own. Ethan could feel the warmth of her presence, a soft energy that made his pulse quicken. And yet, despite the closeness, there was still a space between them, a chasm made of culture, time, and unspoken rules. I did not know," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "Humans, you feel deeply, do you not?" "Yes," Ethan admitted. "I feel deeply because I care deeply. About you, about your people, about this world. That is why I am here. That is why I am willing to face whatever distance stands between us. I may be human, and I may be far from where you came from, but I will try to understand. I will try to meet you halfway, if you let me." Alara studied him, her eyes searching for something beyond words. She walked to the window and looked out over the city, her mind seemingly far away. Ethan's heart sank for a moment, afraid that he had spoken too soon, that his confession might have been too bold. And yet there was hope in her gaze, a flicker of something like wonder, as if she had never imagined that a human could care so fiercely. Ethan dared to step closer, slowly, gently. "You are brave," she said finally, turning to face him, "to cross the stars, to speak your heart. Humans have a remarkable quality. You do not give up on what you believe is right, even when the world is vast and unfamiliar. That is admirable." Ethan felt a warmth in his chest that went beyond hope. He smiled, despite the lingering uncertainty. "I do not expect anything in return," he said softly. "I only wanted you to. No, I only wanted to be honest, finally. I cannot stay silent anymore." Alara nodded slowly, her expression still thoughtful. "This is unusual for my people. We value logic, tradition, and careful decision-making. Yet you have shown me something I rarely see: humanity's courage and heart." Ethan swallowed, trying to keep his voice steady. "I have always believed that even across worlds, understanding and care can connect us. I have hoped for years that we might find that connection." For the first time, Alara smiled, not a full smile, but a small, genuine curve of her lips that made Ethan's heart leap. It was not a rejection. It was not yet acceptance. But it was a beginning, and in that moment, Ethan realized something important. Even when someone seems distant, even when years of longing have passed, courage and honesty can create hope. His feelings, once locked inside, were now free. His humanity, his patience, his bravery, his unwavering hope was finally visible to someone he cared about. "I have loved you for years," he repeated, quietly this time, not as a plea, but as a statement of truth. Alara looked at him with eyes wide and thoughtful, and Ethan knew that his confession had reached her. Her reaction shocked him, not with rejection, but with curiosity, contemplation, and the faintest hint of something new, something that could grow. And for the first time in years, Ethan felt that the distance between them might not be so insurmountable after all. Asterisk the next day. Ethan woke early, as he often did, before the city of Lyra Prime stirred. He walked along the crystal pathways of the floating city, feeling both excited and anxious. His confession to Alara yesterday had left him lighter in some ways, yet heavier in others. He had spoken his truth, but now he was unsure what she felt. Humans had a way of hoping against all odds. Ethan had always admired that in himself. And now, standing so far from everything he had known, he realized how much she relied on that hope. The hope that someone, even someone as extraordinary as Alara, could understand, and maybe even feel the same way. When he arrived at the palace, the usual bustle of alien attendants and emissaries filled the air, but Ethan felt distant from all of it. He moved quietly, aware of every curious glance. He wanted to see Alara, to talk, but he didn't want to intrude. Still, he knew he couldn't wait forever. If he let this distance grow too long, it could become permanent. He finally found her in a smaller chamber filled with hanging gardens, flowers that glowed softly like tiny stars. Alara was seated on a low platform, her hands folded in her lap, her gaze distant as she studied the floating petals. When she noticed him, she gave a small nod. Not a smile, not yet, just a nod. Ethan's chest tightened. He had expected joy, or at least relief. But this quiet distance made him feel the weight of his human heart more than ever. "I wanted to see you," he said, keeping his voice soft. "If it's not the right time, I can wait." Alara tilted her head. "I need time," she said. "Time to understand and to consider what this means. Your feelings are strong human. That is unusual. I must learn how to respond." Ethan nodded, swallowing the sting of uncertainty. He had learned long ago that patience was a human strength, sometimes the most important one. He stayed seated near her, silent at first, simply observing her movements and the gentle sway of the glowing flowers. Hours passed, though to Ethan it felt like moments. Humans were capable of enduring long waits when they truly cared about someone. They could hold on to hope, even when the world seemed distant or impossible. Finally, Alara spoke again. "Yesterday, your words were honest. I cannot deny that. But humans and aliens, we are different. Distance is not only physical, It is tradition, expectation, and the rules of our people. You may not understand fully. I understand enough, Ethan said. I know the distance is there. I cannot pretend it doesn't exist. But I can try. I can learn. I can adapt. I want to be close to you, even if it takes time. That is human courage, our willingness to face difficulty and still act from the heart. Alara's eyes lingered on him, and for a moment, Ethan thought he saw a flicker of something, perhaps admiration, perhaps curiosity. It was subtle, but enough to remind him that hope was not empty. I am impressed, she said finally. You speak of courage and heart, but also of patience. That is rare. I must consider what you have offered. Ethan smiled faintly, relief washing over him. I am willing to wait, he said, because I believe that connection is worth it. That feeling. What I feel for you cannot be ignored. For the next few days, Ethan spent time learning more about her world. He listened to her stories, observed the customs, and even tried to participate in small tasks with her attendants. Each moment he spent with her, he realized, was an opportunity to show that humans were not only capable of love, but of understanding. They could respect differences while seeking connection. Alara noticed. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, her posture relaxed when he was near. She began to ask questions about his life, his people, and the small joys humans found in everyday things. Ethan answered patiently, explaining even the simplest aspects of life, from laughter to meals, from music to storytelling. Each answer was a bridge, each smile a small spark of hope. Yet, despite these small victories, the distance remained. Alara's world was vast and filled with rules Ethan could not fully grasp. The alien courtiers watched them with suspicion, whispering about the human who dared to confess love to a princess. Ethan knew that to them, he was an outsider, and that made every small step forward even more meaningful. One evening, as the city lights shimmered beneath the floating, days passed slowly on Lyra Prime, and Ethan felt the quiet ache of distance more keenly than ever. Though he was physically near Alara, the emotional distance still lingered, shaped by years of unspoken feelings and the invisible walls of culture and tradition. Every morning, he rose with hope, but by nightfall, he often found himself questioning whether he had made the right choice by confessing his love. Yet humans were resilient. Ethan had always believed that perseverance and sincerity could move even the hardest hearts. He reminded himself of this as he walked through the palace gardens, their soft lights casting gentle shadows across his path. Alara had not rejected him, and that alone was a spark of hope, a spark he would nurture. Alara, meanwhile, observed him with curiosity and caution. She was drawn to his determination, his patience, and his unwavering respect for her world. Humans, she realized, possessed a bravery that was different from her own people's courage. They did not always act from duty or tradition. They acted from heart. One morning, Alara invited Ethan to accompany her on a ceremonial tour of the city's floating towers, a rare honor for an outsider. Ethan accepted immediately, though he felt the usual pang of nervousness. This tour was more than a chance to see the city. It was an opportunity to show Alara that humans could bridge differences with care and understanding. As they moved through the glowing pathways, Alara explained the purpose of each tower, the history behind their construction, and the delicate balance that kept the city afloat. Ethan listened intently, asking questions not to test her knowledge, but to understand her perspective. You pay close attention, Alara remarked softly. Most humans I meet are easily distracted. They do not notice the details that matter. I want to understand, Ethan replied. Your world is incredible. Every detail shows how much thought and care went into it. If I am to be near you, I must try to understand, not just admire from afar. Her eyes softened, and for a moment, the distance between them seemed smaller. Ethan realized that human curiosity, combined with respect, could build bridges where words alone might fail. Later, they arrived at a platform high above the city. The twin suns bathed the towers in golden light, and Ethan felt a quiet peace in the midst of his longing. Elara stood beside him, silent, watching the horizon. "It is beautiful," Ethan said quietly. "But I feel there is something missing, something I cannot reach." Elara looked at him, her gaze thoughtful. "Yes, the distance. It is not just physical. You are human, and I am not. Our lives, our rules, our histories, they are different. Even with your courage and honesty, you may never fully understand my world." Ethan took a deep breath. "I do not expect to fully understand it immediately, but I am willing to try. Humans, we adapt, we learn, we care, even when it is hard. That is what makes hope real, and I hope that one day we can be closer, despite everything." Ilara's lips curved faintly into a small smile. "You are persistent, and your hope, it is unusual, but I find it compelling." The word compelling struck Ethan like sunlight. It was not acceptance, not yet, but it was acknowledgement. Even across worlds and cultures, his humanity had reached her heart. Over the next few days, Ethan continued to learn Elara's customs, participating in daily routines and helping her with small tasks. He discovered the subtle beauty in her people's way of life, the careful balance of honor and logic, the elegance of tradition, the quiet reverence for history. At first, he felt overwhelmed, but then he remembered the human ability to adapt, asked questions, practiced new skills, and sometimes failed, but each attempt was met with patience and subtle guidance from Elara. Slowly, the distance began to shrink, not entirely, but enough for Ethan to feel that his efforts were not in vain. One evening, while the twin suns dipped below the horizon, Elara invited him to a quiet chamber filled with luminescent plants. "Ethan," she said softly, "you have shown me something different. Humans, you have heart, patience, and courage. Even when I do not understand, you persist. That is rare. I am beginning to see what you mean when you speak of connection across distance." Ethan's heart lifted. "That is all I ask," he said. "Not for immediate acceptance, not for sudden closeness. Just a chance to learn, to grow, and to be near you. That is enough for me." Elara regarded him for a long moment. Then, for the first time since his confession, she stepped closer. "Your presence, it is comforting. I do not yet know how this will end, but I wish to continue seeing this courage of yours." It was a small gesture, but it meant everything. Ethan realized that humans' greatest strength was not just bravery in battle or survival, but the ability to endure emotional challenges with patience and hope. Even when someone seemed distant, even when years of longing had passed, humans could persist. Their hearts could reach across worlds. That night, Ethan stood on the palace balcony, gazing at the stars. He thought of home, of the life he had left behind, and of the distance that still existed between him and Elara. But he did not feel despair. Humans had a unique way of holding on to hope, even when it seemed impossible. He would continue to try, continue to learn, continue to bridge the distance, not just with words, but with actions and understanding. "I have loved you for years," he whispered to the stars, the words carrying both confession and determination. "And I will continue to love you, patiently, courageously, and with hope." Somewhere in the palace, Elara looked out at the same stars. Though she did not yet return his words, she felt a shift within her, a quiet recognition that human perseverance and heart were extraordinary. That recognition planted a seed, fragile but real, of connection that could grow stronger with time. Ethan understood something important that night. Distance was not always about miles or culture. Sometimes it was about courage, patience, and the willingness to reach across uncertainty. Humans had the capacity to do this, to endure, to hope, and to act from love. And though Alara had not yet said the words he longed to hear, her actions, the small gestures, her willingness to include him, her attention, were proof that even the most distant heart could be approached. Ethan smiled, feeling a warmth he had not known for years. The journey ahead was still uncertain, but for the first time, he felt that the distance might one day be gone. That hope, fragile but bright, would guide him through every challenge. Asterisk. The morning began quietly on Lyra Prime, the floating city glimmering in the twin sun's soft light. Ethan had spent the night thinking about Alara, wondering what she was feeling and how he could bridge the distance that still separated them. Humans were persistent by nature, and Ethan knew that to reconnect with someone he cared for, he had to show not just words, but action. That opportunity came sooner than he expected. A sudden alarm echoed across the city, a warning that a massive storm, rare but dangerous, was approaching the floating towers. The winds above Lyra Prime were strong, powerful enough to shake even the tallest structures. Ethan's heart raced as he saw attendants rushing to secure platforms, while the citizens of the city moved with disciplined precision. Alara was at the center of it all, issuing calm instructions, her composure remarkable. Yet Ethan noticed tension in her movements. Even a princess could feel the weight of responsibility. He realized that this was the moment to show what humans could offer, not just heart, but ingenuity, courage, and quick thinking. "I want to help," he told her, stepping forward. "Tell me what to do." Alara's eyes flickered with surprise. "Are you sure?" she asked. "This is dangerous." "I am human," Ethan said simply. "We face danger when it matters, especially for those we care about." She studied him for a moment, then nodded. "Very well. Follow my lead." The storm arrived faster than anyone expected. Winds whipped through the floating towers, shaking platforms, and tearing at the edges of the city. Ethan held on tightly as he followed Alara and her attendants to the emergency control center, a complex network of levers, energy conduits, and glowing interfaces that regulated the city's floating platforms. "Some systems are automated," Alara explained, "but the storm is too strong. Manual intervention is required." Ethan's mind raced. Humans were not programmed to manipulate alien technology, naturally, but they were adaptable. He observed the controls, noting patterns, listening to Alara's instructions, and moving with precision. His hands worked quickly, adjusting stabilizers, rerouting energy, and monitoring warnings. "This lever," Alara instructed, "redirects energy to the northern platforms." "The southern towers need balance." Ethan nodded. "Understood." He said. He acted calmly, guided by logic and determination. He trusted his human intuition, an ability to combine observation, reasoning, and courage under pressure. Hours passed, though it felt like minutes to Ethan. The storm howled outside, shaking the floating city, but inside the control center, human and alien worked together as one. Alara noticed his composure and his willingness to take responsibility, not out of pride, but out of care. "You are remarkable," she said quietly, her voice barely audible above the storm. "Most humans would have panicked." "I am human," Ethan replied with a small smile. "We adapt, we endure, and we care. That is how we face distance, danger, or anything that separates us from what we love." Alara's eyes lingered on him for a moment, and Ethan felt a spark of hope. His words, paired with action, had reached her in a way that confessions. After the storm had passed, Lyra Prime shimmered under the light of the twin suns, its floating towers gleaming like crystals in the sky. Ethan felt a quiet sense of relief. The danger had tested both the city and him, but it had also brought him closer to Alara. Not in words, not fully, but in shared experience. And humans, Ethan reminded himself, had a unique ability to find hope in the smallest moments. Still, distance lingered. Ilara's demeanor remained calm and composed, her thoughts often unreadable. Ethan wanted to connect more deeply, to bridge the emotional gap, but he didn't know exactly how. He had learned that humans often had to show care through action, patience, and understanding, not just through speech. That morning, he approached Elara while she oversaw the repair of the damaged platforms. Her attendants worked around her, moving with efficiency and precision, while she inspected every mechanism with careful attention. Ethan watched for a moment, unsure how to join without seeming intrusive. "You have been quiet," Alara said, noticing him. Her voice was soft but firm, carrying curiosity rather than reproach. "I've been thinking," Ethan replied, stepping closer. "About the storm, about the distance between us, about how humans and aliens see the world differently. I want to understand you better, and I want you to understand me." Alara studied him, her eyes reflecting the gentle glow of the repaired platforms. "You are persistent. Humans are persistent, yes. You do not give up easily." Ethan nodded. "We endure, we adapt, and we hope. That is how we reconnect, even when someone feels distant. That is how we try to bridge a gap we cannot yet fully cross." Her gaze softened, though she said nothing. Ethan took that silence as encouragement. Sometimes, he knew, the human way was to act first, show care and understanding through deeds, and let words follow. He offered to help with the maintenance tasks, not because he was required to, but because he wanted to show that he could contribute, that he could be a partner, not just a visitor. He moved with careful attention, learning the alien tools, following Ilara's instructions, and asking questions when needed. "You are patient," she remarked quietly. "Even when the work is tedious, you continue. Most humans would grow, frustrated or impatient. I care," Ethan said simply. "That makes patience easier. When you care about someone or something, you endure. You face challenges, even when they seem difficult or confusing. That is human nature." Alara looked at him with a subtle smile. It was not full acceptance, not yet, but it was a small opening, a recognition of the human heart that, as the day progressed. Ethan and Alara moved through the city together, checking on platforms, sharing meals with attendants, and observing the citizens as they returned to normal routines. Each moment, each conversation, was a chance to bridge distance through understanding. "You speak often of hope," Alara said, as they rested near a quiet water fountain. "Humans, you believe in something unseen, something uncertain, and yet it drives you forward." "That is right," Ethan replied. "Hope is powerful. It allows us to endure distance, sadness, or uncertainty, and it allows us to care, even when we don't know the outcome. That is why I continue to try, even when I do not know how you feel." Alara seemed thoughtful, watching the rippling water. "Your hope? It is unlike anything I have encountered. It is steadfast yet gentle. You do not demand. You do not rush. You simply endure." Ethan smiled, feeling a warmth that went beyond words. This was progress. He understood that humans had a unique ability to persist, to hold care and hope without forcing it, to reach across emotional gaps patiently. That was the essence of humanity, and it was what he had relied on to stand here, beside her, despite years of distance and uncertainty. Later, Alara guided him to a quiet observation deck above the city. The floating towers stretched out below them, glimmering in the sunlight. Ethan felt the beauty of the world around him, but he also felt the quiet ache of longing. He wanted her to know how much he cared, how much he had endured silently for. Years? I do not know if this will ever be easy, Ethan said quietly, his voice steady despite the emotions he felt. But I will continue to try. I will continue to care. I will continue to hope. That is what humans do. And that is what I do for you. Alara turned to him, her gaze softening further. You speak with honesty, with patience, and with courage. That I can see. I am beginning to understand, perhaps. There is a bridge between us after all. Ethan's heart leapt. He did not expect a full answer, not yet. But acknowledgement, curiosity, and willingness to consider connection, that was enough to strengthen his hope. Humans thrived on these small victories, and he knew that perseverance would carry him further. I have loved you for years, he said again, softly. Not as a plea, but as a promise, a declaration of persistence and hope. And I will continue to love you, even across distance, even across differences, until we understand each other fully. Alara did not speak, but her quiet presence beside him said more than words could. She was considering, reflecting, allowing his patience and courage to reach her heart. Ethan understood that reconnection was not instant. It was a process of trust, understanding, and shared moments, a process that humans could endure and embrace. That evening, as the twin suns dipped below the horizon, casting golden light over the city, Ethan stood beside Alara and looked out. Across Lyra Prime, though distance still existed, cultural, emotional, impersonal, he felt it shrinking, one patient step at a time. Humans had the ability to endure, to act from heart, and to build hope where others might see only separation. Ethan knew that the journey ahead would not be easy. There would be more distance, more uncertainty, and more challenges. But humans had faced the impossible before, and they could do it again. He would continue to bridge the distance with courage, understanding, and unwavering hope. I have loved you for years, he whispered once more, letting the words carry across the quiet city. Not as a confession alone, but as proof that the human heart could endure, adapt, and persist. And in that moment, Ethan felt that the distance, though still present, was not insurmountable. It could be overcome through patience, courage, and hope, the very qualities that made humans extraordinary. Weeks passed on Lyra Prime, and Ethan felt the quiet pulse of the city beneath the floating towers. His connection with Alara was growing, but the distance still lingered, not in proximity, but in culture, expectations, and unspoken rules. Humans could endure physical separation, but emotional and societal distance required patience, courage, and hope. Ethan relied on all three as he moved through the palace corridors. Alara had begun to include him more in her daily life. They shared meals, walked along the floating gardens, and observed the routines of her attendants. Yet the subtle tension of her royal duties reminded him that their bond was still delicate. Her people watched him carefully, sometimes with suspicion, sometimes with curiosity. Humans were outsiders here, and he had to navigate this carefully. One afternoon, Alara invited Ethan to join her council meeting. It was unusual for a human to attend, and Ethan felt both honored and anxious. The council debated issues of city management, trade, and security. As a human, he did not fully understand the protocols, but he listened, asked questions respectfully, and offered small suggestions when appropriate. You adapt quickly, Alara whispered to him during a brief pause. Most humans would feel lost here, overwhelmed by our rules. I try, Ethan said softly. Humans endure. We observe, learn, and adapt. Even when something is unfamiliar, we find a way to contribute. That is how we bridge distance, not only through words, but through action. Her gaze lingered on him, thoughtful. She had begun to see the human heart in action, its patience, courage, and hope. These qualities were rare among her people, who valued tradition and logic above emotion. Yet Ethan's sincerity and adaptability created a bridge that words alone could not. After the council, Alara led Ethan to the palace observatory, a quiet chamber overlooking the city. The twin suns cast long golden rays across the floating platforms, illuminating the delicate structures below. Ethan felt a mixture of awe and longing. He wanted to reach her fully, but distance still stood in the way. "You have grown closer," Alara said quietly. "Yet I sense hesitation. You wish to connect, but something holds you back." Ethan nodded. "Distance is difficult, especially when someone you care about seems so far away, not in body, but in understanding. I want to connect, but I don't know exactly how. Humans have patience and hope, but even those can be tested." Alara studied him, her expression softening. "Humans, you endure uncertainty differently than my people. You face it with hope rather than fear. That is admirable." Ethan smiled faintly. "Hope is what drives us. Even when someone moves away, even when distance grows, hope allows us to reach across it. We act, we care, we persist. That is what I feel for you." Alara looked away, her gaze settling on the horizon. "Your words, they are constant, persistent, and patient. I am beginning to understand the human way. You do not demand, you do not rush. You endure, and that endurance is powerful." The observatory became a quiet sanctuary. For the first time in weeks, Ethan felt a sense of closeness, even if not yet complete. Humans had a way of creating hope in silence, through presence and patience. His steadfastness, his courage, and his care were being recognized, even across cultural and emotional